Hello. Today's story was written by Helena Castellan. I've put all of her links in the description below, including her subreddit, which she does update frequently. So if you do enjoy this story, please consider showing the author some support. As for the story itself, it gives off major Langoliers vibes. So if you like that specific kind of something is very wrong here energy, I think you're going to like this. I began my flight around 9 hours ago. I left New York for Singapore, which would have me fly for around 19 hours, making sure to pack sleeping pills and chewing gum for my horrifying ear and jaw pain. My sinuses always act up when the pressure changes, and I dreaded this flight, especially because I had to do it alone for some conference. I listened absently to the instructions the flight crew gave us, gestures to oxygen masks, emergency exits, first aid, and so on. They mentioned Wi-Fi, the food menu. The closest attendant was a girl with a tight bun and bubblegum pink lipstick. She had an overly sober expression plastered on, and even though her lips were stretched into a smile, her eyes weren't. After the usual part, some other specifications followed. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind that we will be flying very high and the pressure change might affect you. In case you are feeling extremely sick and experience very serious headaches, do not hesitate to notify the crew. We might experience turbulence when we reach a certain point, and should a critical moment occur, please do listen to the instructions of the crew and the captain and follow them precisely. I didn't really care about whatever they had to say. I doubted the crew would help my piercing sinus pain. The moment we took off, I swallowed the sleeping pills and dozed off. I had some music on and my sleeping mask on, so I got completely cut off by the rest of the plane. I remember some dreams that seemed to clog my head the way fever dreams do, of shapes twisting and convulsing, bigger than I wanted them to be, stretching and taking up space, straining my mind. I remember the feeling of being held down by shapes as heavy as lead, the feeling of hotness and itchiness. This bleak and irritating obscurity was soon completely ravaged by a sharp, explosive pain reverberating directly through my jaw. The pain pierced through my sleeping pill magic and startled me awake, wide-eyed and confused at the darkness that was actually my sleeping mask, sweating and nauseous. I finally yanked it off, but I couldn't focus my eyes on anything, as the pain just kept exploding like fireworks in my jaw, between my eyes and right between my throat and ear canal. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I couldn't even cry or talk. I was just too perplexed, too shaken. I endured the next hours or minutes, praying for it to just end. Hammers were hitting my eye sockets and my temples, and screwdrivers were being jammed into my gums and nostrils. I felt my stomach rise up to my throat, and suddenly a terrible tightness and convulsions took over my neck and chest. My agony ended so abruptly that I could still feel the marks the pain had left, like the moment when you look directly into the sun and then luminous spots plague your vision for a few minutes. I stood there in shock, processing and cursing my stupid sensitivity. Looking over the seats at other passengers, I could spot a few pale and completely shaken faces that told me they had experienced the same pain. I was exhausted and I just wanted to get out of this steel cage. The seat in front of me was too close to my face, the top too low, almost hitting my head, and the plane window too close. My legs felt stiff and my back hurt. I checked my watch. 7 hours in. For fuck's sake. That's it. I'm going to the restroom. I tapped the 2 guys sitting next to me and asked them to stand up. They both groaned and moved away. I stumbled to the restroom, overcome by dizziness. I'm gonna puke in the toilet. I opened the door to the plain restroom, but once I was inside, I couldn't figure out how to lock it. As I said, I was puking, so I didn't mind anyone walking over me. I poured out my stomach and then spent another 15 minutes just splashing water over my face. I'm mentioning this detail because I assume the flight attendants didn't know the restroom was occupied, since it looked unlocked and no one had come in for a while. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let me hear the following conversation.
Should we do it now? I'm not sure. I wasn't even supposed to take this fucking flight. Calm down. If they panic, it'll only be worse. We just need to be very, very careful. Joe, yeah, sure, and if we crash? We won't crash. We've done this many times. Nothing has happened. Calm down. I just think we should...
I unfortunately gagged really loud, and it was truly unexpected, and they heard me and stopped. I proceeded to puke some green juice. I flushed, which sounded like another engine of the plane was right there, in the toilet. Fuck my life. I opened the door and gave them an awkward smile as I hopped to my seat. The 2 attendants looked at me as if I were at a family function and had walked in on them talking shit about me. I went back to my seat and wanted to die. I was quickly reminded of my awfully claustrophobia-inducing seat. I just wanted to go back to sleep, so I swallowed a pill and slapped the mask over my face. Ladies and gentlemen, please close off your window shades immediately. This is mandatory and for your safety, and the safety of other passengers. I couldn't drift off, however, because I felt a hand over me. Hey, what the fuck are you doing?
Please close your blind. The flight attendant chick is going crazy over this,
mumbled the boy next to me while pulling the shade down. All of the flight attendants were watching over their own seat section. The girl watching over us was biting her lip nervously and gripping her seat with her tense fingers, her knuckles almost white. She noticed I was staring at her and gave me a grimaced smile. In the dim lights of the plane, the tension was almost palpable. No one was talking. All blinds were closed. All was silent. The little tablet on my chair showed me we were flying over the North Atlantic, entering the polar zone. Open ocean. No land. What exactly weren't we supposed to see? Some military ship? Military base? I suddenly felt pressure behind my eyes, and the feeling of nausea returned. I felt as if I was hanging upside down. I tried to swallow, and I popped some gum into my mouth. Another 11 hours to go. The plane was awfully silent, and if that didn't scare me, the look of the flight attendants sure did. Their eyes were constantly darting to each shade as they were breathing heavily. They wouldn't act like that for some fuck-ass military base. They looked the way animals do when they're desperate, when they're in danger. It's funny, we like to think that we're not animals, yet we get angry and nervous when someone stares at us for too long, even if they're doing that through a wall or an airplane shell. I felt a knot in my throat.
Hey, why do we have to close the blinds?
Some lady asked from behind.
We're flying over a layer of atmospheric radiation. The glare can temporarily blind or disorient you,
came the automated response.
So it's temporary. Please mind the instructions, otherwise you will receive a fee.
That seemed to shut the lady up. 10 minutes passed. Then another 10. I tried to play some music, but I couldn't doze off, and now I felt as if my skull vibrated. Maybe it did. So did my chest. After an hour of uncomfortable silence, I was certain of the low vibration in my chest and head. Somehow it felt familiar, a frequency so low, but so known to me. I had no idea what to think. The frequency went higher, and then everybody could hear it. Everybody could feel the whole plane vibrate. It was a different kind of turbulence. What the fuck was that? I couldn't really place it, but it seemed very, very familiar and very out of place. A young woman suddenly stood up and turned to the attendants. The look of recognition in her eyes ignited something inside me. When she spoke, her voice had a certain dryness.
What is that? You tell me right now. The wind is very strong round here. The radiation is... Don't bullshit me. Don't you fucking bullshit me. This is my line of work. How is it possible? How?
Were those screams outside? No. They couldn't be. They couldn't be. The woman plunged to open the blind, but the closest flight attendant grabbed her and yanked her out of her seat with a force that had to be illegal. He then pinned her down.
What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? I will sue you.
Those sounds weren't human. No human can emanate those sounds. And how could they even be human? You're flying thousands of feet up in the sky.
Let go of me. I need to look outside. I don't care if I get temporarily blinded.
The attendants didn't flinch. They kept staring at us. And now I was more afraid of them than of what would happen if I opened the window shade. A match of screaming followed, and then the flight attendant leaned in and whispered something into the woman's ear. She went quiet. Another half hour followed while we all stood still, awake and watched over, like some naughty kids. The lights of the plane flickered, then turned off for a brief moment. But the moment they turned back on, a scream erupted from a flight attendant, who plunged and yanked down a window shade. Some old man had lifted it a little bit. I'd only seen a thin strip of light leaking, lingering on his face. Colourless and cold.
What was that?
Sir.
He stood up. His lips moved, forming words without sound. Then the muscles in his neck tightened, and his jaw began to quake as if something were pulling it open from the inside. I've never seen someone so pale, shivering, teeth clattering and eyes wide. His pupils were almost non-existent.
What the fuck was that? How can it be possible? I don't understand. I don't understand. I really don't.
He kept repeating, then froze, mouth parted in wonder. Then he looked up at us and muttered,
We're all going to die here.
That's it. Sir, you're being escorted to the end of the plane where you'll sit with...
You'd escort me to hell and I wouldn't care. You have no authority here.
No one spoke after that. They restrained him and now he's in the back. I asked to go to the restroom and I was granted permission, while passing his figure, rocking back and forth and unblinking. I managed to sneak in one question that bended into the frequency that encapsulated the plane. He answered between his clenched teeth, and his response had me puzzled until I reached my seat. My question had been, what did you see? Another half hour passed and I glanced at the old man, only to see him cold and pale, eyes forever open. He was discreetly pulled into the cabin by an attendant. All of us are afraid to speak, but it's clear that we will not open the blinds. I wrote this with trembling hands, my chest vibrating and the pressure behind my eyes nauseating. I still have many hours left of flying above the ocean, and I can feel the unblinking gaze of flight attendants on me. I feel something coming. I feel something approaching us. I'm afraid to experience the so-called turbulence they mentioned, and the old man's response still haunts me. Those were his last words, before he left us and remained unblinking. Words spoken with a concerning lucidity.
Tell me, have you ever stared into the eye of a blue whale?
Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did. I enjoyed this one because there are still so many unknowns. I think that there are hints right from the beginning as to what might be going on, but it leaves just enough mystery to make you second guess what you think. What do you think though? What is outside the plane? If you've got any theories, let me know in the comments. I have one, but I'm not 100% sure. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.